Hello, everybody. Andy Jacob here with the .com magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series. And I have a real interesting show today. I actually have two guests on the show today. They're brothers, but man, oh man, are they doing a great job in the insurance space, and specifically something called reinsurance. And if you haven't heard about this, it's a really interesting sort of data-driven business that both Anthony and Peter are running. They've really got their thumbprint all over this. They're doing a great job. The name of their company, of course, is Northern Re. We brought them both on the show today because this is a complicated business, but it takes guys like Anthony and Peter to make it simplified in a way that not only their clients understand, but for the show, you'll understand as well. But this is a real interesting space. Watch the show because you're going to learn so much. They're also great entrepreneurs, so I'm so delighted. First, I'm going to say hello to Anthony McKelvy. Welcome to the .com magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here and talk a little bit about what we're doing.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And of course, your brother Peter's on the show. Peter, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Andy. Love the show. Happy to be here, man.
Thank you. Listen, here we go. This is somewhat of a complicated business, but you guys have managed to make it more simplified. And of course, you focused on the data-driven portfolios of property and casualty risk at the business. But before we get started, we're going to go high level. So Anthony, let's bounce to you. Tell us, by pulling the lens back to 30,000 feet, what Northern Re is all about, and then we're going to go.
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with a little bit of a 101, 201 on insurance and reinsurance. So a lot of people haven't heard of the reinsurance industry. In reality, it is the backbone of the global economy and pins a lot of the financial infrastructure that we know today. Think about reinsurance as insurance for insurance companies, right? Generally, this financial product is provided by what are known as reinsurers. Also, private capital is now moving into the space to provide this financial capacity. And that's a little bit where we come in. But again, to simplify things, what reinsurers are doing are purchasing liabilities off of insurance company balance sheets. This provides them with relief, financial security, diversification. So there are a lot of benefits for insurers to purchasing this coverage. In return for those liabilities, reinsurers get what are known as premiums. We've all heard about that term. And so they are compensated in that way. They generate what is known as float. So they generate investment income on those premiums, and they generate underwriting profit from the profitability between loss and the delta between loss. Effectively, where we operate as Northern Re is we are experts in the reinsurance industry and dealing with third-party capital who wants exposure to that asset class. So what we do is we go out and we source these transactions. We structure these transactions, we price them accordingly, and we put them through our infrastructure that we have both onshore and offshore in Cayman in order to securitize these portfolios of risk and make them digestible and purchasable by the investors who are interested.
Wow, it's so interesting because the normal everyday person, we think about insurance, we're paying that insurance every month. It's the auto insurance and the liability insurance and the casualty insurance. If you have a business, you're paying, other types of insurance. There's a lot of insurance out there, but what we don't think about is that there's an entirely different market that the insurance companies are playing in. And we never think about that. And most people don't even know that happens. So Peter, let me bring you in because I know you're behind the scenes a bit, putting together a lot of the sort of construction of what we're talking about Northern Re is doing. Let's talk about that, Peter. Let's talk about sort of how you got started with Anthony in this business and what brought you to sort of start Northern Re.
Sure. So I worked in startups for a long time. Most of them failed. I landed at Uber, which obviously did significantly better and had my first taste of insurance. I was a product manager by trade. I went to join Anthony at another company in New York, and we were in the insurance space. We started looking around and thinking, hey, we're done working for other people. We want to go work for ourselves. We want to make our own thing here. And we kept looking at the problem spaces out there in insurance. We could have sold insurance. We could have created technology around insurance. But we kept coming back to this problem of reinsurance being a huge issue. Insurance companies can't get off the ground, smaller insurance companies especially. and they have to pay exorbitant sums, and those costs go directly to you, Andy, right? Your business insurance costs are going up, your property insurance costs are going up, and we kept seeing that as an issue. So we decided to start a reinsurer. We keep our costs lower, and that allows eventually, we believe, to allow the consumer to have a benefit there at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anthony, I want to talk about risk because when we look at what you do, we look at this industry, it seems like it's really solidified in one main sort of sentence, which is some type of risk transference. I would imagine that the insurance companies love this risk transference and they love doing business with you because when we think about it, transferring this risk is a great way to go, not only for the insurance companies, but also for the people investing sort of in your system. Is that the way it works?
That's exactly right. I mean, we've all seen the headlines in the last couple of years around the frequency of natural disasters, right? Go from wildfires to hurricanes, severe convective storms. We've seen the tornadoes this year. All of that makes it very, very difficult to operate as a primary insurance company unless you have reinsurance support, right? For a balance sheet to absorb those types of losses, it would need to be very, very large or have secondary balance sheets behind it, the reinsurers behind it. This is a prime time for third-party capital to enter the marketplace through a reinsurance vehicle like ours because of those natural disasters. Not only are you providing the relief to those insurance companies and ultimately making coverage available to the policyholders, but the prices of those reinsurance are now at an adequate level so that you can actually earn a profit on those policies themselves. So it really is across the value chain a win-win. And we see it just as one of the most opportune times to enter the space.
Yeah, I love it. So Peter, we think about insurance and, we think about Buffett and all the other sort of investing in these giant insurance companies, but sure. I would imagine there's either new or smaller type insurance companies that are coming on the playing field every single, day or week or year. And I would imagine they're very interested in mitigating their risks through someone like Northern Re. Is that right?
Absolutely. So, dog decided to join the podcast. In the last 20 years, what has happened with the availability of data and a lot of little tech companies started up is these smart sort of entrepreneurs that had previously worked at really big insurance companies. They started to spin out on their own. They realized, hey, I'm really good at selling this trucking product, this general liability product, and I don't have to do it for someone else. Just like us, just like all the entrepreneurs out there, they decided, I'll make my own, I'll do a small one. And those guys have spun out. They're creating incredible businesses, but they do need a new type of reinsurer and a new type of ecosystem to come and support them. The multinational reinsurers, the Swiss Re's, the Lloyd's that everyone's heard of, their expense ratios and their overall structure, it just doesn't work for a new modern ecosystem. And so players like Northern Re, we think that we're the strongest of the new crop, but there are some peer companies that are also doing great, have sprung up and have created an effective way to back these new guys. And, it's just a lot of young, flexible entrepreneurs and companies creating this new space.
Yeah, it makes sense. And Anthony, this seems like it would be a tough business to get into. It seems like you really need to have some, I'm going to call very, very deep ties in the industry. And I think that sort of protects you and protects your business somewhat. Is that sort of the right way to look at this business? Is that not anybody can do this, right?
No, I think, listen, I was fortunate to have a background that started in the reinsurance sector, which is already quite niche, but then to be kind of thrusted into, this newer ecosystem that Peter was mentioning, right? And so I developed a specialization into that very early on. I started to work with private capital just as that sort of new product was coming to market, structuring those transactions, becoming intimately familiar with the sensitivities, both from an investor standpoint, but also the insurance company counterparties, right? And as Peter and I thought about this idea, we were really able to leverage some of those relationships. We were able to sit down with the executives at these companies and understand what it is that made them tick, and also how we could solve for the issues that they were seeing on kind of a deeper level. And you're right. I mean, the relationship part of this industry, as with any industry, is extremely important. I think we've spent a considerable amount of time working with what are now some of our biggest counterparties to develop a huge amount of credibility and trust, right? It's very difficult to walk into a business like this without those relationships and be successful, especially in a shorter span of time. So I think that has been a huge benefit and tailwind for us as we've entered the space over the last couple of years.
Yeah, that's great. It makes a lot of sense. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Peter.
You can imagine trying to walk into an insurance company and saying, "Hey, we'd like to take on $20 million of your liabilities," and not really knowing anyone in the room, right? Because at the end of the day, they are still responsible if something were to go poorly. We obviously, as a reinsurer, are going to step in, but they hold the buck at the end of the day. And so, without those relationships, that's going to be a tough conversation.
Yeah, it's interesting. Peter, how long does it take to put together a raise? I know at the end of last year, you announced a second raise with over 75 million in committed capital. It keeps sort of rolling for your company. How long does the process take to put a raise together of that substantial sum?
Yeah, so there was a big sort of market event last year that facilitated us raising the second round of capital. So we started last year with 25 million. We're sort of off to the races on that. And then in the middle of the summer, this Israeli insurtech, who had been doing something similar to ours, they were a reinsurer by trade, they fell apart. It turned out to be a massive global fraud. And they were sort of making obligation. They were not able to meet their obligations. They were putting up what's called a letter of credit for their collateralization. And someone tried to call in one of those letters of credit, fairly standard. And the bank said, never heard of that. Don't know what that is. You need to call a lawyer. And so the market kind of fell apart really quickly. And we, as Northern Re, were able to sort of step in and say, hey, we've got some capital. We would like to help out. We would like to take any of these deals that sort of this insurtech had previously agreed to, and we will fund those obligations. Our existing investor stood up and said, hey, we'll give you another 50 million bucks. And so that's what took us to the 75. And that actually happened really quickly. The reason we were able to do that was because our existing investor base, we had been so upfront with them, so clear with them that they were comfortable with us and they were able to give us that capital. So that worked out really well. We are going out for another $75 million raise. We anticipate that'll take 4 to 6 months, right? There's a lot of conversations that need to be had around reinsurance. I'm sure you and your listeners can realize that this is a deep topic that we can't really cover in a half an hour. So it takes a lot of conversations and a lot of meetings, but we're really excited to get back out there.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and congratulations. I know you'll do that second round or that next raise real quick. When we think about it, Anthony, and we think about the types of insurance that, let's say, the insurance companies want to send and sort of eliminate the risk. Is there a certain type of insurance? Is it homeowners insurance? Is it life insurance? What type of insurance sort of gets put in the tranche so that, you can do a reinsure sort of, collateralization on it?
Yeah, it's a good question. And short answer is insurers reinsure all of their risks, right? Typically, they're focused on whether that's property and casualty, even life. Insurers, they're all reinsuring those products behind them. We are focused on a specific subset known as the casualty sector. So liability risk, those are effectively personal auto, commercial auto, general liability, professional lines, workers' compensation. We refer to the loss profile as high frequency, low severity, right? You can think about car crashes happen very, very often, but they're typically not as severe, right? A lot of fender benders. It's very common for that to happen, as opposed to think about a hurricane, low frequency, high severity, right? That's the risk that we're not interested in. That's the risk that ultimately is reserved for folks with the prowess and balance sheet to absorb that type of thing. So when we're looking at transactions, it's in the casualty space. We're looking at folks who are in that kind of entrepreneurial ecosystem, right? That Peter was referencing, who are very specialized in their subset, not only the line of business, but even down to the geography, and even down to the strategy, right? They've got a special niche that they operate in, and potentially even some technology or some data set that they're utilizing to operate more profitably. That's exactly what we look for in the entities that we're supporting.
Oh, I love it. When we think about it, Peter, we think about data, and we think about the insurance companies have a lot of data. Maybe they're kings of all data. How do you take the data and figure out what you want to do with it, and which one of the portfolios you want to reinsure, if you will?
Yeah, so this gets me excited to go to work every morning. I'm a technologist by trade, and so solving this data problem was something Anthony wasn't as interested in, and I just was like so pumped about. And so we've taken the time, rather than some of these big multinationals who have really old systems, they've got a ton of legacy stuff, and they keep throwing people at it. And I got to start from zero. And so what we've done is we've purchased some technology, and then we've built our own technology to help us disaggregate data as it comes in, organize it in a similar fashion, and be able to evaluate and analyze things really quickly. So we might see several hundred submissions in a year of reinsurance deals that people want us to do. We want to do 15 of them. How do I take in all of that information, make sure that I can drop it in, evaluate it quickly, and figure out, okay, these 350, they're out. They don't fit our needs at all. And then really spend the time on those last 50. And then on a monthly basis, we're on almost 20 programs now. They all send us a ton of data every single month. I need some of it immediately. And then I want some of it on a quarterly basis to evaluate how we're doing. So Anthony and I have built some technology that's really innovative in our space and allows us to just sort of take that in, put it in a data lake, analyze it as needed, and it all looks the same, feels the same. And that's really, it sounds so simple, but it's shockingly innovative in our space.
Wow. And I would just add to that, I mean, this is the issue, right? In insurance, reinsurance, this is the problem that everybody has. How do you ingest the data? How do you make sense of the data? How do you actually utilize it to be better, to be more profitable? That is a multi-decade long problem that folks are solving. Being on the ground floor of building a company like this, where you have all of these technology solutions, where you have somebody like Peter at the helm who's leading that side of the business, it's just very unique. And I think that's what people are starting to pay attention to. When we kind of launched and we were more focused on the capital infrastructure and what we were doing on the structuring side, now the conversation's turning to, oh, wow, this group can really focus on every aspect and solve kind of what have been these major issues for insurers and reinsurers over the last 100 years.
Yeah, it's incredible what you guys have done. Go ahead, Peter.
Sorry, we were at a convention this week in New York, in InsurTech's Insights. They put on a great event in New York, and it's the top problem everyone's talking about. 90% of the vendors there are focused on some aspect of data for insurance companies, and it's just like you can't underestimate how important it is.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you both have different sort of things that you love about the business, and for the entrepreneurs watching the show, when you have a partnership and each one of the partners has something that they love to do and it coalesces in one sort of unique business. This is a great model for that. Let's talk about sort of money just for a minute. Okay. So Anthony, when we think about it, we think about the insurance industry, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, $75 million portfolios, left and right with your company. Are we talking about a small margin business? How do the people get paid? What's the ROI that people are looking for if you're allowed to divulge that information?
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about it. I mean, what makes us unique in the way that we operate and kind of how we differentiate ourselves is our capital structure, right? When people think about the reinsurance industry or even the insurance industry, they think about multi-billion-dollar balance sheets, right? There is and will always be a place for those folks. But I think what we're seeing now with the newer ecosystem, with this new sort of what we call insurance-linked securities product and standardization around that, is room for smaller balance sheet players. And to your point, there is a very large pocket of business where we can do quite well in, where those larger folks may not be able to play. Right? It's just a different playing field, and that's really what we're taking advantage of. I think investors coming into the space, as Peter mentioned, it's an education process, right? It's talking about the advantages of this, the kind of low beta aspect, some of the market tailwinds that we've discussed today, and sort of what is it, right? How is it structured? When do you get your money back? All those sorts of things that investors want to know. I think the feedback that we're getting are that the returns we're putting forth are commensurate with that of private equity transactions, that are in their portfolios already, right? We pitch this in a number of different ways, kind of depending on who we're chatting with. But the reality is it's kind of multidimensional, and we can be creative, right? That's the nice thing about our infrastructure is we can sort of fit, various molds.
Yeah, I love it. It really makes a lot of sense. Peter, let's go back to data just for a minute. What keeps you up late at night? You must be getting a lot of data, and everybody's worried about their data. Everybody's worried about safety and security. Maybe Anthony's out taking a hike in the woods while you're thinking about data security. But Peter, what's the thing that's really interesting in terms of data protection from your standpoint as one of the managing partners?
Yeah, so having been a product manager forever, I worked with a lot of data teams, but I always had like a data team and a data PM that I would work with. Spending time, we're an Azure shop. We do everything through Microsoft. Spending time learning about the security that they have built into their platform made me feel a lot better when I sleep at night. We don't carry a lot of PII, right? There is some policy information that comes through to us, but it's not terribly not terribly personal. But I know that since I have everything sitting in my Azure environment, I've got everything in my data lake, I'm secure. Now, when I first started getting in all of this information from all of these different submissions, I was freaked out. Right. And we spent a lot of time sort of figuring it out. But once you're with one of these big shops, it makes you feel pretty good. The other big topic in our industry is always cyber insurance. Right. We don't look at cyber insurance. It's not really our product. There are people who do well with it. In our opinion, we just don't have an edge there. We don't feel like it's that low volatility model, that sort of slips and falls model that really works well for us. So I do stress, but I feel good about where I'm sitting right now, and we're secure.
Yeah, and it sounds like you're sort of leading the pack. You go to these conferences, you talk to other people in the field, and you're saying to yourselves, wow, we're way ahead of sort of everybody else in this regard. And if we just stay on this path, we're going to sort of have a path to world domination, which really leads me to entrepreneurship, because that's what entrepreneurs are looking for. So I want to talk a little bit about entrepreneurship. We have some younger startup founders that watch the show. The two of you are managing partners. You guys are really doing a great job in this complicated but very deep business of reinsurance. So Anthony, let me go to you. So let's give some feedback. Let's give some advice to the younger entrepreneurs watching the show. Maybe they're having a tough time. Maybe their startup is floundering a little bit. What type of advice can you give to the younger guys and gals watching the show about what it takes to keep on going?
Yeah, it's a loaded question, right? I think one thing that Peter and I did very well when we started this business was the preparedness that we had going into it, right? We were very well equipped. We'd spent a lot of nights and weekends, not just developing a business plan, but the foundation of that business plan, right? Doing jurisdictional analysis, sitting down, I mentioned, with key stakeholders, people that would eventually become our partners, talking through the different aspects with each other. I mean, I can't tell you, the ups and downs, the roller coaster ride that even just, even before we started the business, that kind of research and development phase, we'll call it, brings. And I guess the advice is, if you are prepared, listen, you're going to need a little bit of luck too, but the more you can remove that element of it, I think that it will shine through when you're having conversations. And also it will shine through just when you're sitting there, at midnight working on something and you have a breakthrough, right? Which will pay dividends in the future. But yeah, that's kind of the one thing that always stands out to me.
Yeah, I love it. And of course, Peter, you were laughing a little bit when Anthony was talking about the roller coaster ride. So let's bounce to you for the younger entrepreneurs. What should they do to keep on pushing, and how do they get through the tough time as a young entrepreneur or as a business person?
Yeah, I think you as an entrepreneur, you already know you're trying to solve a problem, and I think one of the things is to keep in mind is like stay away from the sexy thing, right? In my career specifically, I've tried to zig instead of zag. So at Uber, I started working. I was looking for something to do, right, other than my current job because we had to have two jobs back there. And so everyone wanted to work on growth. It was the sexiest thing in the world. Uber was growing, the fastest company in the world. It's great. I wanted to work on something else because all those smart people were over there. So I went to compliance. Turned out to be a great bet for me because early Uber, no one was focused on it. Middle Uber, everyone was focused on it. It became really important. Same thing with reinsurance. You don't walk into a bar and become the coolest guy to talk to just because you're working on reinsurance. But it's like finding problem spaces that no one else is working on. That's where I think you can be really successful. My other recommendation: work with your brother. You get implicit trust, and you can yell at each other, and it's all going to work out in the end really easily.
Yeah, that's awesome, Peter. And that's really great working with your brother. You each have sort of this run to daylight mentality that you each bring to the table, and you make sort of a full Thanksgiving feast, if you will. I love it so much. Peter, I want to thank you. I'm going to bounce back to Anthony just for a minute, but before I bounce to Anthony, I want to thank you for coming on the show today, Peter. I mean, what you're doing at Northern Re is awesome. I mean, we've learned more about balance sheets and capital structures within the reinsurance industry than I ever thought I would know today. Of course, from Anthony, and what you're doing with the data and the backbone is really interesting. So thanks so much, Peter, for coming on the show today.
Appreciate it, Andy. Thanks for having me, man.
All right, Anthony, and before we let you go, I want to bounce back one more question to Mr. Anthony McKelvy. Anthony, what's it sound like? What's the first conversation sound like when you have somebody that's interested in investing or putting money, with you in this program? What does that conversation sound like? How do they reach out to you, and what main points are you trying to get across to the potential sort of investor in this reinsurance opportunity?
Yeah, great question. I think the nice thing about what we're doing, albeit can be confusing to some parties, is that our world of investors is actually quite broad. There are family offices who are interested in this. There are endowments and pensions who are interested, funds and hedge funds who are interested in this stuff, private investors, right? Wealthy individuals. And across that spectrum, there's a range of knowledge, right? And so the first conversation, that first reach out, that could be, hey, this is something I'm really interested in. This is something that I'm already allocating to, but I'm interested in another strategy. Or, hey guys, I have no idea what this is, but I just want to learn more, right? And so I think what Peter and I have done, and this goes back to kind of the preparedness of it, we have materials and conversational points that we can talk through each of those different phases of knowledge to, whether that's starting with a 101, like this conversation today, moving to that 201, or going straight to the models and getting into the data, right? And I think that's important for us, right? We've had folks who we've been talking to for 2 to 3 years, right? And others who have come in fairly quickly and now are in a kind of a deeper stage of discussion around investment. So, I know that's not a great answer, but it certainly varies and depends on kind of, who it is we're speaking to.
No, it's a great answer. And of course, your entire business is really built around your deep industry ties, of course, a sustainable capital structure, and a partner-first approach to collateral. It's amazing what you guys are doing. I'm looking forward to having you back on the show next year as you fulfill more rounds and fulfill more assets and more balance sheet and capital structure, opportunities for not only insurance companies, but also the people that invest the money. So Anthony, thank you for coming on the .com Magazine Entrepreneur Spotlight Series today.
Thank you. Very much appreciated, Andy.